right, continuing with research methods beyond the experiment, non-experimental research methods that can be used in psychology. One of them many students are familiar with, because chances are you might have participated in this type of research even if you didn't know it, and that's survey research. Anytime you ask participants to report on their own behavior or mental processes, anytime you rely on the participants to interpret their own experiences and give you the data that you need for your study, you are using the survey method or the survey technique. All right, so surveys, they can be written surveys, they can be online surveys. You can have questionnaires, self-report questionnaires, or you can have interviews, like you can have face-to-face interviews, you can have phone interviews. There are various specific types of surveys that can be conducted. If you go and shop at you shop at Target. I know a lot of times when I go to Target, at the end they'll say, hey, if you fill out this survey, you can get a discount for the future or something like that. That's a survey. You know, that technically that's a type of survey. That the research they're doing is probably like marketing research. All right. Also, at the end of the semester at my university, at the end of the semester, students are given access to the SOTs, the Student Opinion of Teaching survey. It is a survey. They are asking you to report on your experience in the class. This uses the survey technique too. There are various ways that you can use surveys. Surveys are widely used in psychology. There are a lot of things that we study where the best option available is to do some kind of survey. All right. What are the advantages and disadvantages of surveys? A huge advantage is convenience. You can get a lot of data very quickly with surveys, particularly like if you post an online survey. I have personally had experiences where I needed to get, say, 300 participants. I post an online survey and bam, that day I've got all my participants. I'm like, whoa, that was quick. Way back in the 90s when I was first finishing up my undergraduate education and applying to graduate school, when I first got experience doing research that involved surveys, we had to do paper and pencil surveys where we would have to get people to come to a classroom or an office, and we'd have to give them the paper survey and they have to fill it out in front of us, and it took a lot longer. It took a lot longer to get 300 participants because you'd have to have a room big enough and you'd have to wait for them and they'd have to show up. And so there's the convenience factor. There are, of course, disadvantages. We are trusting people to report honestly, accurately, in a valid manner. We don't always get that. There are a variety of reasons that you wouldn't get valid responses to survey questions. One simple one is lying. Sometimes people will lie. Not necessarily because they're evil, although sometimes you will get people who are like, I'm going to mess with these researchers. I'm going to give fake results on purpose. But sometimes people are not comfortable answering in a certain way. They worry they're going to look bad, even if you guarantee that it's an anonymous survey, nobody's going to share their answers. Sometimes people are just uncomfortable owning up to certain characteristics or certain experiences. You also have things like misunderstanding the survey. You have to be careful with how you write your questions for a survey. If people misunderstand what you're asking for, they will give you, nonsense answers or they're misleading answers. And then the other thing is that people will do things like skip. They will skip parts of a survey. They will, either they misunderstand instructions or they just get tired of it. You always have to be very careful with a survey to try to not make it too long, to make it simple and make sense. So you don't always get the best quality of data from surveys. You get quick, easy results, but sometimes there can be problems with the results. So you kind of have to be careful how you're using your survey. If you are studying really sensitive topics, you have the issue that, well, hey, this survey allows them to answer anonymously, but they still might not want to answer honestly. And you always want to make sure that people have access to your survey. If your survey is an online survey and some participants don't have internet access, because hey, in the year 2022, some people still do not have internet access, There are regions in the United States where it's not as accessible. It's not set up correctly. I know after Hurricane Ida, which hit my region last year, a lot of people had an extended period of time without internet access. You know, when people don't have internet access, they can't participate in your online survey. And then other times you might have a survey where people don't know that it's available. They might be the perfect person to do your survey, but it still might not reach them. So, you know, there are issues with using surveys. Now, some other terminology related to surveys. You want to have a decent sample of the population. The population is the larger group of people that you're interested in. Well, you're never going to be able to test everybody. You're just going to get a sample of that population. Well, you want your sample to be as representative as possible. Meaning, if your larger for example, your larger population, let's say it's about 50-50 male and female participants. And I'm not erasing non-binary participants. A lot of surveys are set up with a dichotomous choice like that. But let's say available data has roughly 50-50 male-female. You do a study where you get like 30% male. Be like, oh, okay, well that's lower. That's not representative of the overall population. For some reason, we have fewer male participants. What happened? Why did we get fewer male participants? You know, so you're going to have to check for certain things. You're going to have to check for things to say, okay, based on what we know about our population, does our sample seem to be representative? Now, in an ideal world, you'd have a random sample where every member of the population had an equal chance of being in the survey. You're typically not going to have that. So you're not going to have a random sample, but you can hope to have a representative sample. You might have to over-recruit certain folks that you know are reluctant to participate. Like, hey, we want to have you guys involved in the study too. We're going to go out and make sure you know about the survey. Various things that you might have to do to try to get a representative sample. All right. Okay. Next videos, we're going to talk about correlational research, which can sometimes involve observations and surveys, but it gets its own specific topic.